Hello, well today I'm making the heels for my shoes. So shoes are pretty well done now. I just need to get some heels on here. And what I'm doing, I've made a little paper template of the outside shape here of the heel. So very roughly the heel goes back about a quarter of the total width underneath here. So I've made a paper template just by pressing a bit of paper on and cutting round, and then I've been cutting out a couple of heel blanks which are here, and I'm going to be pegging them, so gluing and pegging them to the sole here, and that will make them nice and strong. What I will then do is, I don't want slippery leather heels, I'm going to put a rubber heel over the top to give some grip, which I'll be probably gluing and nailing. So a bit of everything going on. As you may recall, I made what was called a rand. It was a horseshoe shape of leather before I put this outsole down to level everything up at the back here. I've actually got it pretty level. If I hadn't been able to, I would have made another rand, a second rand, and then built the heel onto that. What I found quite useful is one of these abrasive blocks, has a rough and a coarse. This one's by Permagrit, but to get everything nice and flat, it's quite useful. The other thing I would just say with all of this is I'm not going to have a very high heel, and the reason for that actually is that my last doesn't really permit it. And again, I hate to say it, but it's a bit of a failing in terms of me making my own lasts. I feel I've paid quite heavily for this along this little shoemaking journey, making my own lasts. I mean, I'm pleased that I did make them myself, but I think I've given myself quite a few problems along the way. And the heel is yet another one, because my shoe hasn't got the curvature in the right sorts of places I'd ideally have. And if I make that heel too high, then I'm not going to have sufficient toe lift, and I'll be sort of tripping over my front feet. So I'm going to be keeping the heel fairly low, about 3/4 of an inch, a bit under, for that reason. Again, it's learning. This is my first pair, and it's worth trying, and you learn as you go along, and you get a feel as you go along for what works and doesn't work. Anyway, get straight on with the gluing and the pegging. So I'm going to be putting some glue on the heel area. Again, it's this contact type glue. I'm also getting my rubber sole, stick-on sole, on the front of the shoe at this stage, because that will help me get my heel height sorted out as well. What I'll do, I'll stick them on and then I will trim them once they've glued down. This is dried off and it's actually sort of almost soaked in, so I'm going to give it another coat. So I'm just getting the stick-on sole in position there, and I'll now hammer it down, paying obviously good attention to the outer edges, but I'll sort of hammer it in the middle first and then work outwards. Want to get rid of any air bubbles and make sure I get a good bond. Just going to go around this very quickly with a knife just to get the worst of the overlap off. Again, just making sure I've got that in the right place, and again I'll be hammering it down, working from the middle, going out. So I'm just going to give this another little trim round again to get the worst of it off. Just makes it easier then to come to mark out the pegging, etc. So I'm just gluing up the next layer of the heel. I'm going to next of all wooden peg this and glue it to give it a bit more strength. Now I have here a peg wheel which will mark out where the holes go. It's not essential, but it just makes it look a bit neater and a bit more regularly spaced. So it has like a guide, and you can go around making some nice little impressions, which you can hopefully just about see on camera. This is a number 6 peg wheel. It's obviously giving me far too many indentations, but I can use the every third or so indentation. There we are. So then I take my pegging awl. So there's an awl, which is basically, it's like a single long large beak, and I pop that into the holes as straight as I can, going down as deep as I can. I'll just do a couple at the front and poke them in the holes. So the idea of the pegs is partly, it's a bit like nails, but once they're in there, if water gets in, the pegs will also swell. Anything would be better than nothing. So I'm just going around popping more pegs in, making the holes and putting the pegs in. But I'm just at the moment sort of giving the heel a bit of a clean up and a general reshape. So I'm using a variety of tools. To get my pegs down, I'm using this old peg rasp, which does a very effective job. So it's got a breaker on that end and then a rasp on this end. And then to trim around the edge of the actual heel, I've been using this drag knife, which is quite nice because it's got like a protected edge up here, so it doesn't mark your upper, and you can go along and just drag and cut. And then I've been using a standard skiving knife to try and do a bit of levelling off, so where it's just a tiny bit proud, going along and sometimes doing like a slicing action. And then I've also been using this sanding block as well, which helps get everything as it should do. It gives you a nice flat wall all over, lots, without having, you know, lots of sort of dents and undulations. So in a minute I will do the same on the other heel, and then I will pop some dye on this. So I'm just using ordinary Fibings leather dye, and I'm just popping around the whole of the heel and along all the sole and everywhere else. What I'm finding quite useful at this stage is just to go along with one of my glazing tools to try and start to slick the leather surface down and make it harder. So I'm just going along, it's not heated or anything at the moment, I'm just going along and pushing down. By the way, I should just say, I sort of looked at my glazing tools generally and thought, wow, they were quite dirty. So I've been giving them a polish on a polishing wheel, and it is amazing how they come up. I mean, these are 1860, I think they were, 1870, so they're about 150 years old. I know that actually because one of them's a prize-winning in the 1860 London exhibition. But anyway, I've got them quite nice and shiny now, which obviously for polishing they need to be. And I can start to push these fibres down and get them compressed a bit more, which is good. I will later on be using them with some heat, but at the moment I just want to get this dye going down and getting it all a bit more solid so that it gets the right colour with the dye. Well, I'm just heating up my edge iron at the moment on my little Mevs burner here. And I did find actually I had one of these on top of my fire the other day and it worked really well. And that's interesting, it's holding the heat there as it's melting my wax, and I'm hoping I can just drift that wax in to the side of the shoe. give it a good old smoothing action. So I'm just using the beak of my iron at the moment, and there you can see the wax going on it. So I don't know if this is the correct way, but that's what I'm going to do to start with, and then probably smooth it over with a bit of rag and then go back over it with the iron again. It's a good mass of metal, this, so it's certainly holding the wax well. And actually I think that is doing what it should do. It looks alright. I can take a bit of rag while it's still fairly warm. Give that another go. This tool head will obviously cool off quite quickly, so I'll let that reheat. Oops. Slightly out of balance. I've been puzzled by this creasing heater, as I call it, as to its origins, because I couldn't find anything on it, and someone very kindly sent me a link, and it turns out we think it was actually made for heating curling tongs at the turn of the last century, and that's probably what it was for. Early form of, before you had electric tongs for heating, for curling hair, they used something which was heated by one of these lamps, because if you go onto eBay and put in curling tong heater, you might find something similar to this. So if you want something like one of these, it's not bad. You can buy little lamps, oil lamps like dentist lamps people use. Yeah, I think actually this is sort of working. Certainly getting the wax into the leather so it will waterproof it. It's great having such a large tool here, a tool head to hold the heat, because that is not cooling down despite me re-waxing. Look there on the head, it's nice molten wax, so if I work fairly quickly I think I can keep this going on a bit. Anyway, I will carry on going around the shoes and try and get some of this edging on. I should probably try buffing it up, see what that does. It's quite a strong binding sort of wax, but that is taking a shine actually. Yeah, I think a bit more elbow grease generally. Try and get this working. So I'm just getting these heels into position and giving them the usual hammer down treatment. I'm also going to try popping one or two little tacks. So I've got some 16mm little cone head hand tacks. So they're very small, but I'm going to pop those, just a few of those in, and sink them down with a punch. Now to start the tack, I'm going to use this point and I'm hoping that will help me get it down and in. Yeah, I think that is worth doing. So these tacks are long enough that they won't go through the whole way. You won't feel them inside the shoe even when I've sunk them down. And I have a little punch here, basic nail punch, which I can then use. Get my other hammer, nylon hammer, so I don't have metal on metal, and I can just punch this down. And get that tack nicely below the surface. I think I'll just put a few more tacks in, but not very many. So I've got my heel on and I've just sunk in 4 tacks down quite deeply. I had a quick go at trimming the edge with a knife and it's not very easy. I actually think I need to let this dry properly, but I think it's better, as it happens with this particular rubber heel, to use my sanding block and just to go around sanding it, because that does get the rubber off quite well and it's quite controlled. So that's what I'll be doing for getting the heel cleaned round. But that's it before obviously I've got the wax to go on next of all. So some of the Renier Yankee polish is what I'm using. So I'll let that dry, I will then trim it around and I will then be waxing. So I'm just going to heat up one more of these heel irons and try and get this a bit sorted, all this wax. So I'm using Brilliant Wax Yankee polish, and the idea is heat up the tool, rub it on the wax, rub it on the shoe. At least I think that's what it is. And that will do 2 things. It will seal it, so protect it from the elements, but also get a nice coating, nice colour on the sides there of the heel and the sole. So I'll let this heat up for a few minutes and then I'll get waxing. While this one's heating up, I'll just show you one more edging iron. So this is the same kind of thing, heat them up to apply the wax for the edge. And this one is narrower, so it's got a 17 width and an 18 width. They come with lots of different widths, but you find the one that fits your shoe for the edge of your sole there, and you can go around and again get that to a nice polished edge. And you can tell this one is a French one by the style of handle. All the French ones have this sort of style of handle. So there you are. Anyway, let that get hot. Immediately you can see there's wax melting quite nicely on there. So I'll try and get all of this a bit smoothed off if I can. So what I'm trying to do here is go backwards and forwards, work the wax in nicely, and also get it going down into the leather. And that's given me quite a nice smoothed off edge. I'm trying to make sure everything gets coated. So I'll go around the rest of the heels with this one. See, it's still nice and hot, the wax is still nice and fluid. I keep applying bits of wax in it every now and again. Keep it nicely topped up. And try and get all of this nice and smooth. I've just got a spot of wax on the leather. I can see actually why people do sometimes put tape around to protect. That's not a bad idea. I'd say the sort of secret, if you like, with these tools is to get a lot of heat on the head. If it's holding a lot of heat, it melts the wax more quickly, but also you get a more even application because the heat radiates and it sort of spins the wax around each side, and just seems to be far more efficient if I have a fair bit of heat on it. So a little tip there that I think is worth bearing in mind. It's interesting because when you look at the old ones, a lot of them are burnt. Now I appreciate if you leave them on a burner and go and have a cup of tea, you probably will heat it to the extent that you will burn it. But I've just had to answer the door actually for the postman, and it was interesting that by the time I got back here this was really hot. I put the wax on and gosh, it went on so much better. So thank you, postman. Anyway, nearly done with that, so that'll be the edges done. And well, I think that'll be it actually. So that's all the edges done, all the sole and the heel all waxed over and nicely proofed. What I'll be doing in the next video, yes, is taking the lasts out and trying these on. Really are now there. I'll give them a clean up and we'll have a trial fitting. See if they fit after all this work. I'm sort of looking forward slightly apprehensively to that one. Time will tell. Anyway, see you in the next video. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.